What is going on, everybody? Welcome to some more Division 2 content on the Jack of All Trades channel, and I'm super excited to bring to you the Exotics Masterclass series, and we're starting with the Backfire, which is going to become very relevant soon with the DLC coming out next week. You're going to want to be HazPro, or at least look into those kinds of options. Now, with the Exotics Masterclass series, what we're going to do is take a deep dive into individual exotics. This one's going to be on the Backfire, and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the pros, the cons, the quirks, how to build for it, all the different types of builds. We're going to cover every archetype of build that you can make for the Backfire, so you can understand whether it's worth building for if you have it, or farming for if you don't, and how to maximize its potential in your loadouts. So let's take a look at the Backfire and the talent itself and start talking about it. Alright, ignore the build I got going on here, just the random strikers. Let's take a look at the Backfire. Okay, it is an exotic SMG, and I think it is one of the best designed exotics in the game, and it really captures to me what an exotic is. It has a lot of potential upside, but it also comes at a cost, and that is the bleed. So if you're not familiar with this exotic, the talent payment in kind basically allows you to stack up to 200% crit damage on the weapon, and you can keep those stacks up, so it's really good. They stack on hit. Total is 100 stacks, and you get 2% crit hit damage per, so total of 200, and that's just from the talent. We're also getting chance and damage on the weapon mods itself, and then of course you have your base watch, chance, and damage. And it's SMG, comes with crit chance. I've rolled wine with damage targets out of cover, and so we're building up a lot of crit damage, so a lot of potential upside. The downside is that on reload, depending on the stacks you have, it applies a bleed to you that can do quite a bit of damage. At full stack here, it's a 10-second bleed that's doing 50% of your armor gone from that bleed. Over time, of course, over that 10 seconds, but it hurts. And it also applies the bleed status effect, so it messes up with your screen, and it stops you from sprinting. It's quite annoying. I'll show it to you in the range. And why I think it's such a well-designed exotic is because it has a lot of potential upside, right? Sounds great, but you have to build for it. You can't just throw it on to a build that's not made specifically for the Backfire. It's not going to work the best. It's not going to be optimal. You have to get creative with building around it and specifically for it in order to maximize its potential. But when you do, it's extremely strong. So I'll throw up some stats here from IKEA. I don't do all of the super deep number crunching with the damage, but I do trust these numbers, and shout out to him. If you look at here, this is a comparison of what the SMGs look like on a template build with strikers. All right, so this is including specific talents and not just the raw weapon stats itself. It's taking into account the build. So you see the Backfire there at the top performs great. It's the second best SMG in the game across the board for stats. But of course, this is not taking into account the bleed and the HazPro. A little further down, though, you will see a hazard-protected version, which is going to basically make it so you don't bleed. So it has no downsides, other than the fact that you had to trade all of your rolls to make it HazPro. And look at how much damage it's doing. That's a crazy amount of burst DPS, and the sustain is really, really strong. That's 12% more sustain than what we're baselining here is a TACVEC with Sadist. So that's really, really strong. To me, when I look at that, that means it's worth running. You're getting the upside. It's there. The question is, how do we get it without trading off too much? So we just looked at the weapon and the talent. Let's get into the range so I can show you some things about the weapon. Alright, so we're in the range now. And I'm going to show you guys what that bleed looks like. We're running just a mostly red build, okay, that has no additional hazard protection on it. So in our stats here, you'll see that my HazPro is that base 10% that comes from the watch. Now, if your watch is maxed out, you're going to be getting that 10%. So that's pretty much standard. And look what happens here. Those stacks build up as we shoot. And then, boom. That's a long bleed. And it hurts. And you see, we're at half stack, right? So at max stack, we lose 50% of our armor. That was costing us just there 25% of our armor. Now, if we get some more shots in, we're going to take another bleed. Now, I am healing from the modifier, which I probably should have turned off. That's 50% of our armor gone. Now, you see, obviously, we're hitting really crazy numbers. Look at that, to the body. Not even full stack. Look how bad this bleed's going to be. That hurts. That hurts. So that is the downside of using the Backfire. Is that bleed, is that damage, and of course you saw the screen effect that it was having. It's annoying, it's not pleasant, and it stops you from sprinting, which is the most annoying part of it, practically. Now, they did make the Backfire better. I was explaining to you guys the talent. This is the updated version of the talent. They changed it in one of the last waves of updates, and it is way more viable now than it used to be. It used to be 200 stacks, and that was really hard to maintain and to build up. The damage you take from the bleed is the same, and then importantly, they also changed the mod. So now it's 50% crit chance from the mod, and that does actually make quite a bit of difference. It comes into play later when we're building for it. The other thing to note with the talent, and this is where we're going to start getting into some quirks, okay, is you lose all of the stacks at 10 seconds. It is not a decay. That is the one part that sucks the most, I think, of this weapon, is that when you've built up all those stacks, you want to keep them, and they don't decay the way striker stacks do. For example, the timer you see at the bottom, you see that little tick looking thing at the bottom, and this is actually going to kill me. I'm going to kit. But when that timer's done, boom, all our stacks are gone. Now let me kit up fresh here. So that's important to consider, all right? But with the changes here, making it down to 100, it's not as devastating when you lose all of the stacks like it was before when you had built up all the way to 200 stacks. Then if you just had nothing to shoot in between waves because it's only 10 seconds, you would lose all of them. That sucked. But now it's a lot more viable, okay? And your mag size, if you roll to damage targets out of cover, is 50. So that's halfway there. If you mag dump, you saw like I was doing with a target, and hit all of your shots, because we are playing up close, ideally with an SMG, you can get halfway there in one mag, which is pretty good. And that's 50 stacks times 2% crit hit damage per stack. That's going all the way from 0 bonus crit to 100% extra crit. So in a way, you can kind of see it like a super strained, in a way, if you're just using that one mag. We'll talk about that more later. But the other quirk I want to show you here while we're in the range is what happens when we hit max stack. So again, I'm going to start bleeding now. Okay, I'm taking my bleed as expected. But now watch this. Now that I've been at 100 stacks, you would think I would take that full bleed, but nothing happens. That is an important quirk with the Backfire. You saw how much I was bleeding before. I got no HazPro on here. Hit the reload, no bleed. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and it is really weird. I don't know why it does this, if it's intentional or not, because it doesn't explain it in the talent. But if you're at max stack, you don't bleed anymore on reload. But you'll see as soon as I lose it, it's just unfortunate. You're going to lose all 100 of your stacks. and then you go back from the start and hit that reload, you bleed. And you'll see I can't, like, see that motion? You can't really sprint around. And this lasts for 10 seconds if you have no protection against it. So, it's got a lot of potential with that extra crit damage. You know, one mag can get you up to 100% extra crit damage. And then we can go double that, right, with full stacks. Super strong, but the bleed, not just in terms of the damage, but in terms of the status effect itself, does suck, and that's really annoying. And the quirk there was, at max stack, you don't bleed at all, even if you have no protection against it. So that could be something to think about when we start talking builds. Now let's get into it. So when it comes to builds for the Backfire, there are essentially 4 main archetypes of builds that we're going to go over. And I think that covers pretty much every type of build you could make for the Backfire. We're going to dive into all of them right now. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the 4 archetypes I'm talking about, and then we're going to talk in detail about each of them, okay? The first type is an avoid type of build, where you just kind of avoid the bleed entirely. Try to get around the bleed, not through it, like we'll talk about with a Haz protection build, where you're going to build against the status effect through HazPro, hazard protection. This one, there's some ways that you can avoid, kind of loophole the bleed and the reload itself. So that's one. Then we have the Yolo build, where you're saying, forget it, I don't care about the bleed, I'm just going to tank it. And I personally would never make a build like this. Maybe I'll try, but it's not for me. I do not want to be dealing with the bleed. I don't like the status effect. I don't like dealing with all of that. It's not for me, but it is a viable build. You could just say, you know, forget it, I'm going to deal with the bleed. Maybe you're getting enough healing. Maybe you don't care about the status effect. That's possible. We'll get into those types of builds. Then we have what I think is the main type of build that you would make for the Backfire, which is a hazard protection build, a full hazard protection build. So we're saying we're going to go complete HazPro with the setup and have 100% immunity, not just to bleed, but to all status effects, which will include that Backfire bleed that we're going to be taking from the reload. And then sort of sub-variant of the hazard protection build is a specific bleed protection build. So we can leverage some of the individual protections that we have, because they are split, and build specifically for bleed protection. That way we can mitigate entirely the reload damage from the Backfire, but we're not necessarily immune to all other hazards. We're just really focusing on the Backfire itself. So those are the 4 main types, and we're going to start talking through them now. Before we get into that, when it comes to, I was talking about bleed and hazard protection, these have individual amounts. The bleed protection you need is not actually 100%. It's, last time I checked, it was around like 95 to 97. So if you're at 95 to 97, somewhere around there, bleed resistance, you won't bleed anymore from the Backfire reload. So it's not 100%. Now that doesn't actually change much of anything in terms of how we build. You just don't need to optimize everything to the max value. You don't need to completely min-max it to be bleed resistant. It has a margin of error. It's not enough such that it'll let us not run a attribute. The way things add up in the game, it's like a max roll of HazPro, and the mods is 10%. So it's not gonna make a big difference in terms of giving us an extra attribute slot. It's just helping us out with optimization. You want to be at 97. All right, let's get into it and start talking about these build types. And we're starting with the avoid build. Now, when I was talking about the avoid is right? You could lean in, do damage. When it comes time to reload, swap. Swap off, right? Now you don't bleed. Then you swap back, right? I've lost all my stacks. But, you know, I don't bleed. Do your damage, start the reload, swap off. And you'll see that it says 0, but when I go back, hit the reload, then boom. That's all good. So you could play it like that, you know, without doing anything weird with the build or something like that. I mentioned before, it was kind of like a super strained because, well, you're building up to, you know, with a full mag dump, you're getting up to 100% crit damage. Swap off, no bleed, swap back. You lose all your stacks if you just keep doing it like that. Yeah, swap back too quickly, then you take the bleed because I maintain my stacks. As long as you're swapping to the point where you're losing your stacks.
Incoming backup request.
You see there? No ammo, swap back, no stacks, hit the reload, no bleed. The stacks are what causes the bleed, so if you lose the stacks because you swap away from the weapon, well, then you don't bleed. Now, if you miss your timing, and you saw like I did there, and you start the reload before you swap, well, you're still going to take that bleed, and you're going to lose because you're going to go back, and you're going to not have the stacks. So that's not too fun. Yeah, so that is you know, a way that you could use it if you want. I don't know if it's that strong. I don't know if I would bother using it like that. The other thing you could do is run Centurion Scabbard. Okay, now this one involves swapping on purpose, and this could maybe help leverage the backfire and that crit damage. Our second one, if you haven't seen my guide on the Centurion Scabbard, go check it out. It talks about a lot of the quirks of how this works, and one of them we're going to explore here is the auto reload. Now, I think a lot of you guys know this by now, but when we swap to this one, right, we swap back, look at that mag increase. That mag increase is also going to give us an automatic reload. So I swap away, you get this, you swap back, you lose all your stacks, but now I'm getting an increased mag size so I can build up more stacks, and then I swap. You see it says 1 bullet. But with the scabbard, when I swap back and get that second buff, it reloads it for me. And then you can build it up, swap off, use your other weapon with the first buff, and you swap back. Boom! Auto loads your weapon, gives you more, so that'll give you up to, you know, if you fully mag dump, that's getting you up to 75 stacks is 3/4 of your stacks. So you could do that in one mag. Just use it, not build for hazard protection at all, and then keep swapping back and forth. You will lose your stacks every time you swap away, which is unfortunate because this backfire is really, really good for sustained damage if you're maintaining those stacks. But you could use it like this if you want. Now, the other thing I'll cover when it comes to the avoid strategy are these knee pads. I don't think I've seen anyone ever use these in a PvE build, but it makes perfect sense if you're doing this archetype of build for the backfire. Performing a cover to cover or vaulting reloads your drawn weapon, and when you run these, it will work. So we're just gonna start this mission real quick, so I can get some targets to shoot and some things, some beautiful boxes for me to cover. So you can deal damage to these guys, and then, boop, reload it. No bleed. See that? Now, the timing is kind of weird. You can get some bonus armor, and just keep vaulting. Whoop. It's a bit ridiculous. And you do need to be careful, because you also need to keep doing that all the time, which is kind of awkward. But then if you don't have something to vault over, and you accidentally drain your mag, you see I missed it there, and then you take the bleed, which is unfortunate. So, you saw how that works. I'm not going to say anything about whether this is viable or not. It works, okay? Again, this isn't a complete build. It's just something that you might want to look into when you're thinking about how to build for this weapon. It does work. Using the talent from the exotic Ninja Bike Messenger knees will avoid the bleed. Whether that's your playstyle or not, I'll leave that up to you. And we're going to get into the second build archetype, the Yolo build. Alright y'all, for the Yolo build, I just swapped some things around here. You'll see that I got kinetic momentum charging up there. I'm going to be trying to heal through the bleed. And that's the vibe of the Yolo build, is you're going to take the bleed, you're going to tank it, but you're going to build in such a way that you can heal through it. So you'll see how much I bleed. Alright, so if I start DPSing this target, right, of course you guys saw before how much you're going to bleed, and it's going to hurt. But now what we can do is if we drop this and put this up, you'll see that I'm healing. There's going to be a big bleed now, right? But with both of those skills up, I'm actively bleeding, but I'm also healing through it. And you'll see it didn't really strip my armor. Because I got so much healing going on, and this is a full red build. Look at that. It's just kind of going up and down like that. So, this is a type of build that you could do. Now, you're still going to get hit by the status effect, but you can build such a way that either through armor on kill, maybe bonus armor, maybe healing skills like this, you can build in such a way that you don't care if you bleed, but you're able to heal through it, so you're not actually taking the damage. Now, you still have to deal with the status effect side of things, because we're not immune to the status, but we're able to out-survive the damage from the bleed. Now, of course, there's a lot of ways you can do this. You can use healing skills. You can try to, use this just to get you to the point where you're at max stack, where you wouldn't be bleeding anyway, like I showed at the beginning of the video. You can use bonus armor, armor on kill. Memento might be a good choice. There's lots of ways that you can do it, but you're actually going to heal through the bleed itself. And that's that type of build. Maybe that's interesting to you. This looks pretty viable to me, actually, but again, I don't like dealing with the status effect itself. Now, if you want to be completely immune to all statuses, let's take a look at our next build archetype. The next build is really fun to use, and is my personal favorite type of the Backfire builds, and it has a lot of use cases that are a bit niche, but it's pretty darn cool to be completely immune. You can be completely immune to all hazards. Now, I don't think that should be surprising that it's possible to build that way. You can get to 100%, but it also impacts the Backfire, and it's a really good synergy. Maybe you're building for hazard immunity for something else. Again, I don't do PvP, but there are some cases where it might be nice to not be affected by any hazards. Like I mentioned, we'll be fighting the cleaners, maybe you're fighting hunters, and the disrupt, see what I'm getting at? Now, I'm going to release full builds after this video, but I just want to talk about the types of things that we can do for a HazPro build. Where does it come from? Well, we have the 3 pieces of Eclipse that give us 30% hazard protection. That's pretty substantial. A recent gear set, Cavalier gloves, give us 30% just for the 2-piece. So that is very enticing and could be used on a build. Hint, hint. The other place that you get it is... Actually, I don't know if it's here, but... Cheska, the 2-piece, got buffed and is now 20% hazard protection. You get 10% base from your watch. There is the elusive Yolo that gives 10% for that 1-piece. So if you're making this kind of build, you can just throw a piece of Yolo on if you don't have a lot of room for anything else, and that'll give you 10% hazard protection from there. And the other place you can get hazard protection for this kind of build, I don't recommend it because I'd rather the consistency, but the booster hive actually gives you, increases their weapon handling, melee damage, but hazard protection. So you could build around the booster hive for hazard protection as well. Maybe that'll be a good play for you, for your playstyle. I like building it into the attributes of the build itself by using those pieces of gear and brand bonuses that I talked about, because that way you know guaranteed that whether your hive is up or down, you are good to go for all hazards. It's pretty useful. Alright, now the last build archetype that we can do is very close to the HazPro build, but like I mentioned, is focusing specifically on the bleed. Now where does that come from? Our attributes on gear, we can roll hazard protection, and that is the same, just applied to everything. So 10% HazPro means 10% bleed, 10% disrupt resistance, 10% shock resistance, all of them, okay? But on the mods, you'll notice that when we get here, we have specific resistances. Bleed resistance, shock resistance, disrupt, disorient, all of the resistances are displayed separately in individual mods. So what we can do is, you know, on a build, we have 3 pieces that always come with mod slots. And then, of course, you can do improvised gear or something like that. You know, maybe if you don't have a piece of Yolo and you need that room for, like, that extra 10%, maybe you throw on an improvised piece and then use bleed protection specifically instead of go for HazPro. But this is giving us room here from, we always have these 3 mod slots, no matter what gear you're running, that you could run specific bleed resistance mods in there, and that'll give you, if you assume you have max rolls, 30%. So that's 30% that we can get from there, and then you only need to get the rest of the 70, really 60, because your watch comes with 10, then you only need to find 60% hazard protection from elsewhere in the build across all of your rolls and brands. So that's pretty good. Depending on the type of build you're doing, it gets really specific with the Backfire, and there's not a lot of room. So being able to build for bleed specifically might help. You won't be like all badass and HazPro towards everything, but at 70% hazard protection and 100% bleed, you're not going to have any damage or deal with any status effect from the Backfire itself, and you're still at 70% hazard protection. So the other statuses that will be impacting you will do it for a very, very short time. You'll like get EMP'd for like a second, then you'll be able to pull your shield right back out, you know? 70% is pretty strong. It's not as good as being 100, of course, but it could be still useful. It's not just a throwaway, whatever, to be 70% hazard protected. Alright, y'all. So we just covered everything there is to know about the Backfire and how to build for it, and it's all its little quirks and everything. I'm going to have the timestamps so you can jump around and refer back to this video if you're interested in making one of these types of builds. We talked about the Avoid type of build, Yolo, HazPro, and BleedPro build types. Those are pretty much all the ones that I could see where it fits, and some of them have got a lot of potential. It really comes down to your playstyle or what you're building it for. Overall, the Backfire is super, super strong and has a lot of potential, but it comes at a high cost. Whether you're dealing with that bleed or you're trading off a very large percent of the attributes in your build to avoid the bleed or hazards in general, there's not a lot of room to play around with the attributes with this build, and it will cost you damage trade-offs or survivability trade-offs in one way. That being said, there is content where being HazPro or hazard resistance is very, very useful, and once you've tried it, it's really hard to go back. One of my favorite builds, which I'll be showing you guys soon, is completely hazard protection using the Backfire, and it's really hard to go back after you've gotten used to playing with that. You could stand in fire and stuff like that. It's pretty fun, but I digress. There's a lot of potential with the Backfire. It is one of my favorites. You can see that I put quite a bit of expertise invested into it. It is worth it. I don't have a lot of guns that I've pushed up to 25. That's my max right now, and this is one of them for a reason. I hope you guys enjoyed this masterclass of everything Backfire. stay tuned because all those build archetypes I talked about, well, I'm going to be giving you specific builds with gameplay coming right up. And hopefully some of these will help you get set up for all the cleaners that we're going to be fighting in the new season with the DLC. Stay tuned for the build videos, and I will keep updated links and timestamps down below so that when the builds come out, if you're watching this video later, you can refer back to them for the different types. Until then, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Enjoy.